Good, yeah, we're getting lots of good information from our speakers, and we've had Dom in, we've had Megan in from HR, and learning all about office of the future, sporting aspects, nutrition,
wellbeing strategies,
all sorts of things. So hopefully we're helping get the word out there. So how's things been for you? You look well, obviously, but I should imagine you've had more than your fair share of challenges over the last 6 months.
Yes, yeah. It's well, the thing is, it's for us, it's sort of we never stopped. I mean, that's the basic thing is we just continued, and this was added to business as usual. So it's been really a challenging time, and the staff have just been working flat out, and of course that's one of the key things that we've got to look at from a health and wellbeing point of view. Yeah,
and when you joined us for Bio back in June, which seems like about 5 years ago now, I just put the questions to Sridhar there that I put to you about how you quickly pivoted, and I think your response to that particular question is, had you been given 5-10 years notice on this, it'd have probably taken you best part of a year with all the toing and froing and no we can'ts and yes we cans, and
even possibly even longer than that, because I think that the amazing thing is that within 10 days we'd switched from being an office-based organisation to working remotely. And all credit to the IT staff, all credit to people for just embracing it and actually really taking hold of it and moving that switch. How we'd have switched, given the vagrancies of local government and what needs to be done, is always a challenge. But I just can't thank the staff enough for the way they've reacted, such a positive. And I'm sure it's a lot of other companies as well have been doing similar things in that sort of changeover. And but of course, the thing, as I say, is that we're still doing business as usual. So it wasn't a case of close down business and then restart it. It was a case of let's carry on. It's a bit like sort of driving on the outside lane of the motorway while you're trying to change the engine. I mean, it really has been that sort of integral, because we deliver basic provision to people who on real personal care. And one thing that always, I don't know why, springs back to mind, because it actually is quite socially isolated, but we were still gritting the roads at the start of the pandemic. And as I say, it is socially isolated because it's one person driving around, but that's the sort of thing we were doing and still doing. And of course the thing is, it's how long does this go on for? And that's the really important thing about health and wellbeing, that we're used to sort of working in emergency situations, whether it be flooding or snow or a major incident, and everybody sort of gets down and really works hard, and working directives are probably put to one side during that period of time. But then how long can that be sustained for? And I think the difficulty was at the beginning, no one's sure how long this is going to go on for, and what it means when people take breaks. And it's so important that people take breaks, particularly now with the remote working and Teams and Zoom and all the other facilities, because meetings tend to go, you switch from one screen to another, and you can't do that. You've got to say 5 minutes, have a gap, walk around, do something just to make sure you keep the health and well-being going, because that's so important. Otherwise you can be sitting in front of a screen from 7:30 till, I think the longest day I've had was I started at 7:30 in the morning with my first meeting, and it was 11:15 in the evening when I finally got away, and it was pretty much back-to-back meetings throughout, because everybody sort of says, you're there.
You don't realise it. I mean, Frank, who was on earlier, Frank from Unipart, he was saying his wife tapped him on the shoulder and said, "Frank, you've been sat here for 14 hours."
Yeah.
He didn't appreciate it.
No. And that's the thing. And so it's really important for people to take that time out to really sort of look after their own health and well-being, because working with computer screens, you're very focused on it, and you're intense, and you've got to make sure you just take a breather, get up. I had a meeting the other week with Samuel Gray, who's very much into health and well-being, and one of the key things he said to me was, make sure that you're always having these breaks just to take in, and make sure that you're not sat at the screen all day, which is so important.
Are you proud of how communities have come together in the local area, and do you think we're going to have to do more to keep some of those initiatives going?
phenomenally proud. I mean, speaking as my division, as the local councillor, every village has had a community hub where people have got in touch, and they're organising sort of prescription deliveries, shielding deliveries, all those sort of basic things, and it really shows that on the ground, that's where people know the knowledge, because a local council knows what's going on with Mrs. Smith or Hilda or Joe or whatever, and can contact them immediately, whereas sometimes any sort of council in a larger area is a bit too remote. So it's really important that those communities have come together. It's fantastic, and we've got to somehow embrace those communities. And how do we retain that value? Because it'd be such a shame if we lost the community spirit, the values. It was helped by, of course, a lot of people were off work, furloughed, and they're working from home, so they were able to commit time to it. But it's been, the response has been phenomenal, and it's everybody just pulling together. And I suspect as we move into the winter, we're going to have to see another version of that, unfortunately, coming forward as well, where we really do come together. And but it's not just about supporting each other; it's about actually making sure we don't spread the virus as well.
I've certainly found that aspect of the communities definitely helped my own well-being during this time.
Yes, it's. I mean, otherwise people can feel very isolated, and I think the key thing about it is that sometimes in small villages it's easier because there's more sense of a community, whereas in sort of more densely packed urban areas, then it's very difficult to sort of go out and see who your neighbour is, because somebody entering a block might be one of several residents, and so you don't know who it is. And particularly people who are living by themselves in sort of one-bedroom or bedsit apartments, that's where the health and well-being really comes in, because you can work in remotely if you have your own space, but an awful lot of people have been having to share space with the kitchen table, with the dining room table, with the kids working from home. But if you're sitting sort of with your laptop in a bedsit, that must be really challenging and really difficult. So we, as employers, we should be supporting and asking people, are they able to be functioning correctly? Do they need to come into a building? And sometimes people may need to come into a building to actually sort of have that experience and not be sitting, propping the laptop up on with a few books, which we all do, don't we?
I mean, what sort of key, is it 7,000 staff that you have?
It's 3,500 actual staff.
Okay.
If you include the teaching staff as well, then it sort of goes up, but it's 3,500. And it's been fantastic. They've, as I say, within 10 days, transformed it. But there are some people who do have to work with clients. There's other people who, for a variety of reasons, aren't able to work from home. And we've taken that into consideration and made sure that they've got the right facilities. And that's the other key thing, going back to sort of sitting on with your laptop on the edge of a bed propped up with some books. That's not very good for you. You need the proper equipment. And we have been working with all staff to make sure they have the appropriate equipment. But it's about 3,500 people who've all moved out. We were starting to sort of come back towards office working for October, and some people will, but we've got to be very careful who's going to come back to work, where they're going to work, and what's needed around them as well.
Quite a task managing all that, I should imagine.
It is, and again, the big thing is we're still delivering that job. It's, like every other organisation, I'm not saying there's any different, but we're still having to do all that work that everybody goes on. I mean, one thing is, for instance, our library staff, because our libraries were closed, they're now reopening, but all our library staff, we relocated them to other areas of the council to help out on people with blue badges, because still blue badges needed to be done. All those sort of things. So we redeployed across the council, so we didn't furlough anybody. I think that's important to make sure that as a local government organisation, we weren't sort of furloughing people, we're actually looking after our staff and treating them. And as we move into this next phase of going back into offices, What does it mean? It's a reduction. We can have about 10 to 20% of the staff that we previously had. What's the impact going to be on property? What's the impact going to be on the face-to-face values? But that's an interesting thing, saying face-to-face, because one of our key areas is children's social care. And actually we've got better engagement with young people now because that's the platform they use. They're used to WhatsApp, they're used to Facebook, and it's perhaps the people like me that struggle with that, but for young people, that's their most, so they don't find it strange. And I think that's, the adapting, and I think that if we went back to the way we were, it would be a major, major mistake. And I think that all businesses evolve, and this is an opportunity for our business to evolve and see what's new, perhaps move away from directorate-based areas and actually be looking at council, because I think for the vast majority of people, they just want the council. They're not interested in the different departments or the different councils. They just want a response from the council. So I think that's one of the areas we've got to be really clear with, to make sure that we rebuild in the new way, not the old way.
Yeah, I mean, and people do look at you for just clicking your fingers and solving problems left, right and centre. And I'm sure that's increased tenfold in the last 6 months. Yeah. As you say, your business as usual, but got all these other challenges and everybody expects you to have the answers. So I'm sure you have your sympathy with central government as well.
Oh, absolutely, because we have to provide the best for everybody, which obviously you can't please everybody all the time. So you've got to compromise on certain things, and in a sense, people being at home furloughed has given them the opportunity to sit down and have that time and space to think about that project that we've been meaning to do for ages, and this is the solution to it. And we can understand that we've got the solution, but of course it boils down, is that the best for the area? Have we got the funding for it? Because the funding that has cost, we've spent about an extra £51 million so far on COVID measures. The government have been very good, and we've had £35 million returned to us by government funding, but it still leaves a shortfall. The government have said they'll be continuing to look, and it's not just Oxfordshire County Council, it's all councils across the country. So how that funding is going to be come back to us, because of course at this stage we're normally planning next year's budget, but if we haven't finalised this year's budget, it's really difficult. So there's a lot of challenges for us as we move into the winter, the planning, what does it mean on the budget, and will there be what the second wave will look like in Oxfordshire? Will it be isolated? Will it happen at all? So there are a lot of pressures there, and the planning just continues all the time. It's like that sort of continuation snowball round and mounting.
With such a range of staff, what kind of things have you done to help with employee well-being?
Well, I think the first thing is listen. I mean, it's the number one thing you can do. Listen to your staff and try to understand what their issues are. For the more frontline staff, it's the fact that they've got to work in this new system, and they want to have everything around them. They need everything around them and the support. Because again, if you're going out to visit people and then you come back, normally you'd come back to an office situation, and whilst client confidentiality is always there, you can sort of download sort of feelings talking to other people. Whereas when you go back from your bedroom to your lounge, there's not that chance to sort of unload and just have a chat. So that's one aspect of it. There is the collaboration, and I think talking to staff, the collaboration is really becoming not an issue, but they want to be able to just sit down and throw a few ideas around. And working remotely, it's not as easy to throw those ideas around. So how can we facilitate that in a COVID-friendly way? We encourage people to sort of, staff team members, if they were normally going out on a Friday night or whatever for a quiz, yes, carry on that sort of thing. But again, it's all these. So the key is listening to people. There's not one thing that fits everybody across the system. And if somebody does have an issue for whatever reason, that they're finding it difficult to work at home, then what can we do to facilitate them to be able to work better from home, or, as I say, work in an office in a COVID-friendly way, safe way?
It must have been very difficult for you to adapt to all of the different COVID secure changes that have happened.
I think, like any organisation or business, it is difficult for the adapting to understand exactly what it means, and sometimes, for instance, the PPE, personal protection equipment regulations changed quite rapidly at the start, and so what you were saying in the morning, sometimes this is a change in the afternoon. So how did you keep up with that? Keeping up is always important, but we try where possible to keep up to date with the latest regulations. Always be looking at that, making sure that we are complying with the regulations. But all organisations are the same. I think one of the biggest challenges for us and all organisations is how do we have face-to-face meetings in a COVID secure way, and what protection do we need to put in place? How do we change everything? Because it's going to change the way we all operate for the next 6 to 12 months, and we need to make sure we do have that, so we are able to operate in a safe way. And
moving forward, I'm talking about residents and the workforce and getting everybody back to work and giving people the confidence to get back to work. Obviously, we've heard about the difference between working at home and working back in the office. Some offices just aren't geared up for taking people back on board, but where an office can accept staff, they might have to rely on public transport, so having sort of that confidence to get back on a bus or on a train, etc. So what sort of role can you play in helping give the workforce the confidence to step back on a bus? I mean, you obviously had the massive congestion issues before lockdown, which have sort of evaporated overnight, but there's still some transport dilemmas there.
The transport's a massive issue, because actually car journeys in and around Oxford are sort of between about 80 to 90% of what they were pre-COVID, so they're sort of getting back to levels, and we may very well see congestion occurring again. But actually the park and rides are operating about 10% of the capacity, public transport about 20% of the capacity. So you can see there's an awful lot of capacity there, and how do we work with the companies so that people feel safe on the bus? Obviously it's important to wear a mask, but then when you're actually on a bus, if you're in your family bubble, you can sit next to each other. So obviously from a bus company's point of view, sort of having zigzag seating isn't appropriate all the time, and even standing at the bus stop, because if you look at bus stops, there's a lot of bus stops are even on fairly wide pavements, it's people passing by, so all these things have to be taken into account. How do you make people feel safe, making sure that they are able to get back onto public transport? I know the bus companies are working really hard with additional cleaning of the vehicles so people can feel secure. Just locally here, a Sunday service was introduced about a month ago, and getting on the bus, it was the driver has the protection of the perspex. You've got to wear your glass, contactless payment, that's so important to make sure that we're not sort of passing on like that. And being sensible about it. As much as anything, it's what can we do as individuals as opposed to what can organisations do. The bus companies are working really hard to encourage people back on, because obviously what we don't want to do is return to a situation of gridlock.
Yeah.
Are there any things that you're going to be doing moving forward that you've learned during this time?
I said, well, I mean, remote working, and it's got to be the one. And for councillors in particular, it's absolutely incredible because we're having, and also parish councils. I mean, sort of big support, shout out to parish councils because they've adapted as well. It's we all think of sort of the Vicar of Dibley sort of parish councils, but they have adapted. They're all Zoom meetings. So we're not going to go back to that. which on climate change agenda and carbon, that's so important, because if you're a councillor living in Henley, driving into the centre or catching a train into the centre of Oxford is a really major thing. So having remote meetings is good. So I think that's the key thing. And it's about being adaptable. I mean, flexibility and adaptability is so key to all these things, just to make sure that everybody can operate in a different manner. So I wouldn't say there's one particular thing that's...
What was it like the first time you did that Zoom or Teams meeting together? I'd like to have been there.
Which one? That's the question. I think the interesting thing for me is the fact we had the technology already. And I mean, that's just something...
It's bizarre, isn't it? We're reluctant to use it.
It's not as if we sort of had to go out and buy it. It was there on our systems. But, if we said, we'll have a Zoom meeting, what's that? So, of course, there's the inevitable, you're on mute. I wish I had a penny for every time something, but, there's that. And people getting used to it. The big difficulty for councils is actually voting, believe it or not, because in the chamber, obviously, you can put your hands up or you can signal, you can do that. But if you're online, there's that, do we go through a roll call? Do we put our hands up on chat? Or what happens if someone drops out? So that's actually the biggest challenge we have for council meetings. But it was quite interesting. And some of our more senior members, should I say, we've had some interest, but I'm sure everybody's had it. I mean, not just local government that have had their issues.
Did people find it difficult the first time they put the camera on as well? Did you have some people it took a while before they decided to do that?
Put the camera on. Well, do you have a background, or or what do the people who just forgot that now they're showing not themselves but actually behind them as well. That was quite interesting, and inevitably you get the dog or the child interrupting. I'm sure everybody else had the same sort of issues, but the technology, and I think that's the big thing for me, that what we can't do is go back to the way we were. We've made that quantum leap, so we've got to really do it, and we've got to have more virtual meetings, not just with councillors and officers, but with actual residents as well, so that get better efficiency out of it. However, I think a lot of people are looking forward to face-to-face meetings, because, I mean, this is much more enjoyable than that. The last time was fantastic, but, just having this ability...
I'm used to seeing you like that.
Yeah, that's it. Having that ability just to talk to each other, it's how we act as humans, and I think that interaction for everybody will be great when we get back to the new normal.
Well, we've heard that a lot today. We're all social animals, aren't we? We crave this interaction, so... the more we can do things like this, the better. But if you've got one big hope, and obviously we all hope there's a vaccine on the horizon somewhere, but what's your big hope for the County of Oxfordshire over the next 6 months?
Well, over the next 6 months, that we actually rebuild and recover and restart the economy, because the economy is so vital, and that is about businesses being able to operate successfully. The sort of ending of the furlough scheme is going to create I know there's a new announcement, but could create a tipping point for businesses. But people have got to be adaptable. They've got to retrain. It's a bit like some of our librarians had to retrain to be customer service operators or to be marshals at a recycling centre. And that adaptability, because if you just remain as you are, you're never going to sort of progress. We've got to learn from what's best out of the pandemic and make sure that we build that economy, because if we've got a strong Oxfordshire economy, then UK PLC will be strong, and actually we've got an awful lot of funding to make up for in the future.